Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now resume consideration of the estimates for the Department of Education and Early Childhood Learning. Questioning for this department will proceed in a global manner. The floor is now open for questions. The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to welcome the Minister to her new role as Acting Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning. I had a couple of days back in the spring with the Minister, the member for Transcona, and so looking forward to getting into the details with the Acting Minister. Just somebody said to me that I should start off nicely, so I will ask if the new Acting Minister could introduce the staff that she's brought with her today and what their titles and responsibilities are.
Honourable Minister Schmidt.
Thank you very much to the member for Spruce Woods for that kind welcome. I appreciate it, and I hope that we can continue in that spirit for the rest of the afternoon. Because I want to make sure I get everyone's names right, I know everyone on a first name basis, but because it's been about a week, I'm going to ask if it's okay for our Deputy Minister, Brian O'Leary. Okay, never mind, I've got to. So, today we have with us our Deputy Minister, Brian O'Leary. We have our Acting Executive Financial Officer.
No, he's confirmed.
He is not acting. He is the Executive Financial Officer for the department, Andrew Henry. We have the ADM for Early Learning and Childcare, Sarah Whiteford. We have the ADM for System Performance and Accountability, Mona Pandy. And we have the Director of Ministerial Affairs for the department, Rylan Ramarace. I appreciate the opportunity to introduce them, and I just want to take a moment also to extend my heartfelt, sincerest wishes to the Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning, the MLA for Transcona, who is on a temporary medical leave of absence from this role. The MLA for Transcona, the Minister of Education, has dedicated his entire career to the students and staff and children that are educated and cared for in our province. I know that our team is incredibly proud of the work that the Minister has done so far in this portfolio as we come up upon the 1-year anniversary, or I think we just passed the 1-year anniversary of our government. So I just wanted to take a moment to reflect on the work he's done, not just as Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning, but also as a teacher and a principal and a colleague to so many students and children and teachers and educators across this province. I run into folks in the community all the time. Minister Altomare spent his career as an educator in the River East Transcona School Division, which is the school division in which my constituency resides. So I'm very lucky to have met so many of Minister Altomare's colleagues and students, people in our province who he has impacted during his time as a teacher and as a colleague and as a principal. When I'm out door knocking in the great constituency of Rossmere, it's rarely a day that goes by where someone doesn't mention, oh, you work with the MLA for Transcona, you work with the Minister of Education, and they proceed to tell me a heartfelt story about how he has touched their lives and has contributed to their education or the spirit of collaboration in their workplace. So I just want to speak to the Minister of Education, the MLA for Transcona, and tell him how proud I am to be able to support his work for a limited amount of time, that our whole team has his back, and that we wish him all the best. We miss him greatly, and we can't wait to see him return to the legislature and continue on in the incredible work that he's done as in his role as Minister of Education. Thank you.
Before we continue, and just as a reminder, we'll be referring to everyone with their titles, so either minister, honorable minister, or member for, and we'll refrain from mentioning last names. And I apologize if I already did. The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly echo the minister's comments with respect to the member for Transcona. He shared with me on his last day here the current circumstances that he is in and the fact that he would be undergoing a personal health journey, and we certainly wish him well in that. And hope that our colleagues from the other side will keep us updated as to his condition and progress. And yeah, certainly we wish him well. He did, after he shared with me his condition, he did tell me that I had a job to do and to continue doing that job in spite of his absence, and so that's what we will continue to do here today. So my question to the minister is, and I understand this is becoming a popular topic today, but her government committed to new legislation regarding P3s, and so I'd like to ask her, what is the status of that new P3 legislation?
Before we continue, just a quick reminder, and I'd like to thank everyone for the warm wishes in regards to the Minister of Education, but that we are to refrain from referring if members are absent or present. Having said that, the Honourable Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. And thank you to the member for the important question about what is in the Minister of Education's mandate letter, and that is to legislate to ensure that there is accountability on P3 projects. And I would imagine that this would be a nonpartisan issue, that accountability when it comes to public dollars is something that all members of the House should agree on, shouldn't be controversial. I look forward to the members opposite supporting accountability legislation when it comes forward. But I wanted to reflect a little bit about serving the public interest. That's what accountability legislation that's what the goal of accountability legislation would be to ensure that we're acting in the public interest. And that's what we were all elected to do, every one of us. I spent a lot of time on the doorstep speaking to Manitobans about what their priorities are. And I don't think I'm alone in what I hear. And what I hear, one of the most common themes I hear after that Manitobans are concerned about the healthcare system that was left in a really dire state, after we hear about public safety concerns that went out of control in the last 7.5 years. One of the more common themes that I hear, and I'm sure members in this room will agree that they hear, is that there's not a lot of trust left in the political system. They say, well, I don't know if we can trust these politicians to do what they say. It's all politics. It's all posturing. And we saw some of that just a few minutes ago in the chamber today in question period. And we saw it yesterday at Committee of Supply, and we saw it last week in question period, and we saw it the week before that, which is the opposition ceding their time. The opposition has a tremendous job to do. And what they purport to do is to hold government to account. And they have the opportunity to do that in various ways. They have the opportunity to do that here at committee. And they have the opportunity to do that in question period. And it's their job. That's what Manitobans elected all of us to do, was to serve their interests, to work on behalf of Manitobans.
Point of order, the member for Fort White.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. And while I appreciate the Minister's comments, it's been 3 minutes, and the Minister has not once addressed the question, which is in regards to Triple P. So I cite the relevance of the Minister's answer in regards to simply asking the question in Triple P, not on the 3.5 minutes of nonsensical comments. Thank you, Honorable Mr. Chairperson.
So this is not a point of order. The chair doesn't rule on the quality or quantity of answers. And I will now yield to the Honorable Minister with 2 minutes left in her answer.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. And again, when we're talking about P3 legislation, we're talking about accountability, and we're talking about serving the public interest. I can absolutely appreciate why the member for Fort White is uncomfortable in discussing what is in the public interest and discussing about accountability. His party was held accountable on October 3rd of 2023 after a disgraceful, failed election campaign that was run on the backs of trans children and on murdered Indigenous women. So I can appreciate that talking about what's in the best interest of Manitobans is not in the purview of the MLA for Fort White. So I apologize that this makes him uncomfortable. But when we're talking about P3 legislation, we're talking about accountability, we're talking about what's in the public interest. And rather than hold this government to account, what the members opposite did today in question period, and they've done in committee supply, is cede their time, cede their power to ask the government questions, to play some sort of internal politics. So I can appreciate that this discussion about what's in the public interest makes them uncomfortable, but that's what we're here to discuss when we're talking about P3 legislation. I can advise the committee that the Minister of CPGS is leading the work on developing that P3 legislation, because clearly that type of legislation is not legislation that would only impact the Department of Education, would impact across government, and happy to take more questions.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairperson. And despite the minister's initial comments, it didn't take us very long to get to partisan shots. And that's okay. And that's okay. And I appreciate that she's focused on what's going on in other people's estimates and in question period. But I would just encourage her to stay on topic with the estimates that she's here to discuss, and assure her, if she has concerns, that I have no issue with accountability, and I have no interest or intention to yield any of my time today to other independent members. And so I'll come back to the question on P3s. I appreciate her eventually getting to the answer, sort of, about the P3 legislation and it being developed. And so I respect that it may be being led by another department. Does the minister have any idea or indication as to whether that legislation may be introduced this fall? Or is it more likely to be developed and introduced in their second year in office?
The Honourable Minister.
I thank the member for the question and for the opportunity to talk more about accountability. We inherited quite a mess, our government did. There's a lot of questions that we had about the planning and the procurement processes that the previous government was engaged in. And in fact, I mean, their government had questions about it as well, about P3 procurement. I seem to recollect that the former premier, Brian Pallister, had questions about P3 procurement and resoundingly rejected P3 projects under the auspices that, on occasion, those projects are problematic, that they don't necessarily always are in furtherance of the public interest, that on occasion they have proven to cost more in the immediate and in the long term, which is not in the interests of Manitobans and the Manitoba taxpayer. It was in 2018 that Brian Pallister rejected a P3 plan, saying it was too costly. But again, as the previous government did, they flip-flopped, and then in 2023, they decided that P3s actually were a great plan. And they announced a plan that was written on the back of a napkin to build 9 new schools under this procurement process. But we know now that the NDP have come into government and we've taken a look at the plan, taken a look at the books, that there was no real dollars and cents attached to these plans. That these plans were developed by a government in their dying days in a desperate attempt to convince voters that all of a sudden they had a plan to build schools. And they gave Manitobans false hope. And that's unfortunate. And that's something that our government is not going to do. We are assessing the procurement process. as I stated already, the Minister of CGPS is leading that work. That legislation will be forthcoming and is being developed in a deliberate and responsible and transparent way to make sure that Manitobans receive value for dollars when it comes to building public assets like schools. Honorable Chairperson. We are continuing to assess our existing space and where the need is the greatest. And we will make sure whatever procurement process that our government follows is done in a responsible and a transparent way, in a real way, with real dollars and cents attached to those projects, and in a way that charts our government back to balance after being left with a nearly $2 billion deficit, driven largely by what I talked about before, which were campaign commitments written on the back of a napkin without any real budgeting, without any real funding plan or dollars and cents attached to them in a desperate attempt to buy votes. Luckily, that plan failed. Luckily, Manitobans saw the truth and decided to go in a new direction. We're very proud of the direction that our government is moving in, and we're proud of the legislation that will be brought forward in the public interest to make sure that there is P3 accountability.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. And there's a bit of revisionist history going on from the minister. Unfortunately, today she calls the plan on the back of a napkin, and yet the P3 Manitoba Schools project was posted on the government's website, MERX, for a number of months. Professional companies who do this for a living had lots of time to put in a bid, assess the requirements that were posted as to what they were going to be required to build by the government, and then submit a bid which closed either the day of the election or the day after the election. Now, it is at that point, once an RFQ has been responded to, that then these applications go to Treasury Board to have funding allocated. That's how the process works. I know the minister knows this. And so their government walked in to a closed RFQ that had successful companies who do this for a living submitted bids to build the 9 new schools, and their government said, no thanks, we're not interested. And now, on top of that, the MERX website now states that the RFQ is just closed. No other justification given, and it's my understanding that no responses are being given to proponents when they email in to ask what's going on and why has this happened. So, revisionist history aside, why was it not a priority of this government to take those 9 schools that had closed bids from successful companies that do this for a living to Treasury Board and have a discussion about funding them properly?
The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So what we know and what Manitobans know now was that there was no real fiscal plan to get these schools built. Certainly not a responsible fiscal plan. The previous government claims that they were good fiscal managers. We know that's not true. Our government, in the early days, commissioned an independent group to look at the books, and what they told us unequivocally was that the previous government were making high-risk decisions. And I would argue that this plan was exactly that. There was no plan on how much these schools, these 9 schools, were gonna cost. $500 million? $1 billion? We don't know. And we don't know because this plan was developed without assessing existing space, without assessing need. Manitobans saw right through this. The previous government had 7.5 years to improve the education system, whether we're talking about those public assets, whether we're talking about outcomes, and they didn't do it. And Manitobans know that. And Manitobans chose, thankfully, to move in a different direction, in a direction to elect a government full of educators that understands the needs of the education system, whether we're talking about capital plans, whether we're talking about supports for those schools in the form of educators. We know that some school divisions are really suffering right now with a workforce shortage, which is another mess that we have to clean up from the previous government. We're gonna do that planning work. We are already doing it. We're going to continue to assess the need. We're gonna continue to assess the procurement process to make sure that Manitobans are getting value for money. We are not just gonna announce schools to give people false hope. That was the strategy of the previous government in their dying days. We're gonna make sure that our plan is achievable, that it's fiscally responsible, that there are real dollars and cents attached to these programs, and not just real dollars and cents. Yes, you can announce schools. You can go to Treasury Board and get approval. And you can also leave the province in a $2 billion deficit. And that's what the previous government did. So we have a lot of work ahead of us to advance our goals of supporting kids. That's really what Manitobans want. Manitobans want one-on-one time between their kids and their teachers. They want safe spaces for their kids. They want to make sure that there is a fulsome curriculum, and space is a necessary part of that equation, but there's a lot more that goes into running a fulsome and productive education system than just capital space. We are doing the work. Our department is doing the work. They're doing fantastic work of doing that real planning work that is necessary in order to build schools in a fiscally responsible way that sees value for dollar and that serves Manitobans' interest. Thank you.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And of course, when the minister puts it on the record that no needs assessment was done, she's just wrong. Each of the 9 schools in the Manitoba Schools Project were identified and put forward by school divisions in their respective areas as their most urgent priority to get built. She can ask the Brandon School Division et cetera, whether they feel that those schools in the 9-school project were just made up by the Progressive Conservatives, or whether they were actually consulted about them being their most urgent need. I know what the answer will be, and I think Manitobans do as well. However, what's most interesting about the minister's most recent response is she said that it's not a responsible fiscal plan to build these 9 schools, which sounds a lot to me like this NDP government is admitting that they are trying to meet their commitment to balance the budget on the backs of building new schools in this province. So, for the record, is the Manitoba Schools Piece 3 project completely dead in the water, or will this minister be reviving it in some portion?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Yeah, I certainly don't dispute that there is need out there. I don't dispute that the school divisions, as they do, put forward and prioritize their lists. That's not what's in dispute here. What's in dispute is the failed plan of the failed PC government, which I will reiterate was virtually written on the back of a napkin. There were no dollars set aside for these 9 schools that the previous government announced and had no real plan to actually build. And that's irresponsible. That's playing politics with Manitobans and with Manitoba kids. And that's not something we're gonna do. Our government is committed to making commitments that we can follow through on, making commitments that are done in the best interest of Manitobans. Our commitments are gonna be funded with real dollars attached, real plans. The previous government made commitments that weren't budgeted for, and that's irresponsible. And that's what's left Manitoba in the mess that we're in now. We have a huge mess to clean up, not just in this department, but in departments across government. But Manitobans have elected the team to get the work done. We're rolling up our sleeves. We are working with school divisions to assess their need. We're a listening government. That's something I'm really proud about, and something that surely the previous government can't claim. The previous government acted in really a very sort of father knows best sort of way. They didn't listen to Manitobans. They didn't listen to their senior public servants. They didn't listen to teachers. They didn't listen to school divisions. They made plans and promises that were politically driven, And that's not the way that our government does business. We are listening to school divisions, we are listening to parents, we are listening to communities. We know that the need is great. I absolutely do not dispute that. The need out there is great, but we're getting the work done, one school at a time, one build at a time, one hire at a time. Our government, since getting elected in only 1 year, our government has added more than 630 net new positions in our school system. And that's something to be so very proud of. Because you could build 9 schools, you could build 900 schools, you could build 9,000 schools, or you could announce them anyways. But if you don't have the workers in the buildings to serve the kids, then you're still at square one. Because ultimately, that's what our public education system is designed to do. It's to serve kids, it's to serve families, and to serve our province. A good education is the foundation of a good life. Our government recognizes that. We value the workers that work in our education system. And we're gonna get these schools built. We're gonna do it in a fiscally responsible way, one that helps Manitoba get back on a path to balance, something the previous government did not care about. They blew the bank on their way out the door, made promises that they knew they couldn't keep, giving false hope to Manitobans, something that they're still trying to capitalize on here today, unfortunately. But that's okay. Manitobans have a new government and a government who's going to build schools. We built this province, the Manitoba NDP built this province, will continue to build.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, Chairperson. At the beginning of the minister's answer, she agreed that the 9 schools were the priorities of school divisions. She said, I do not question that they are the 9 schools that were the priorities of school divisions, i.e. the previous government was listening to school divisions and their priorities. And then at the end of her answer, she says that the previous PC government ignored school divisions completely throughout their tenure in government. So which is it? And this is just an example, folks, of the convoluted logic that the NDP has tied themselves in knots with to justify why they canceled 9 new schools at their first cabinet meeting. So, and another quote that the minister just said on the record here today is that these plans for these schools were done on the back of a napkin and that there was no real plan for them to get built. And so I'd like the minister to reiterate that comment for all the companies that submitted properly tendered, properly laid out applications and proposals to the government of Manitoba on MERCs, that she believes that their work on those applications was poorly done and that it was done on the back of a napkin and that they were not real plans to build those schools in this province. I'd like her to reiterate that for the record because that is what she just said.
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. So we agree that new schools are needed, that more space is needed. We couldn't agree more. We don't agree with the previous approach of the previous government. We are not cutting schools. We are building schools. And we're going to create more jobs in the process, as we've already done, and our government is very proud of. And I think perhaps one of the issues that we're having here today that is causing our disagreement is perhaps the definition of the word plan and what exactly a plan means. So making announcements, putting out RFPs, having those RFPs be bid on, ostensibly could be called a plan. But if there's no money allocated in a budget, then I would argue that that's not a plan. So I think that's some of the disagreement that the member opposite and I are having today. The previous government wants to continue to try to make the point that they had a plan to build 9 schools because they simply put them out to tender. If you don't have a plan on how to, in a fiscally responsible way, actually build those schools in a way that's not going to bankrupt the province, then you don't have a plan. Our plan is going to be done in a responsible, transparent way. We are working with school divisions to assess need. That work is ongoing. We are doing a space utilization study, something the previous government didn't do. We're going to make sure that Manitobans are getting value for dollar. And most importantly, we are going to make sure that children are supported in their education and that we're meeting the needs of communities all across the province. One way that we're meeting the need in Brandon is with an addition to the Maryland Park School. Additions are another way, sometimes a more fiscally responsible way to achieve the same result of a big new capital project. We're meeting the needs of that community with an addition, which will meet the needs of the community and will also hit the mark on accountability and fiscal responsibility. We understand that the need is great, but I can assure Manitobans that the NDP government is listening. We are on the ground. We have a government bench full of educators that understand the school system, that understand how to meet the needs of families and children and communities. Our plan is going to be done in a way that considers existing school capacity, is going to consider the space utilization assessment and enrollment trends throughout all of the school divisions in relation to the needs across the province. So again, very proud of our capital plan. Really excited about heading into our budget planning process for the 25-26 year, and excited about producing results for kids and families and communities in a way that they can trust, in a way that they can rely on, in a way that they know are going to produce actual results The results of the previous government are clear. We've all been living them. It's a new day in Manitoba. We're going to produce results that folks can count on.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Well, thank you, Chairperson. And the minister and I agree that a financial component of a plan is necessary. And that's why the RFQ closed the day after Election Day so that whoever won that election could take the proposals from the businesses and the companies that were going to build those schools forward and ensure that they were included in the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And who wrote that fiscal budget for the upcoming fiscal year? That's right, the NDP government did. And they refused to include any financials with respect to funding the construction of these schools, which means the decision not to fund these schools rests entirely on the government's shoulders, despite their endless efforts to throw accountability backwards. And so my next question for the minister is, does she have an estimate on how much each of the cost of each of those 9 schools will increase for every year that construction is delayed from starting?
The Honourable Minister.
Surely, we all understand how inflation works. Manitobans, thankfully, elected an NDP government that is fiscally responsible. We are so proud of the work of our Premier and our Minister of Finance in delivering real results for Manitobans that they can count on. And what that means is that Manitoba has the lowest inflation rate across the country and has now for how many months? 8, 9, many months now. Manitobans have enjoyed the lowest inflation across Canada thanks to the actions of this NDP government, who they know have their back, who they know will take real action, action that the previous government could have taken when they had the opportunity, when they were in government, but they didn't. They let inflation run rampant. Inflation during Heather Stefanson's time in Manitoba, we were one of the highest rates of inflation under the Heather Stefanson government. I remember reading about that every day in the newspaper. Not only was she the least popular premier, but we also had one of the worst inflation rates under the leadership of Heather Stefanson. But luckily, Manitobans elected a new government and we're moving forward. Again, our government understands inflation and understands that certainly inflation goes up every year. But I also understand that to build those schools, if we're talking about how inflation will increase the cost of building schools, we can all agree that will happen. We're committed to building schools every year. We understand that inflation will make that more expensive every year. But every year we need to build new schools. That's what we do here in Manitoba. But you know when these schools would have been cheaper to build? In 2016, in 2017, in 2018, 2019, in 2020. The member from Fort White wants to heckle me here in committee, and that's unfortunate. But he needs his time in the spotlight. We all understand. But it's coming. It's coming. It's coming. We'll all have to put up with the PC's disaster of a leadership race over the next few months. We understand that he always needs the spotlight.
Order. I'll just remind all members that unless you have the floor, that we'll keep our comments to ourselves. Back to the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. And again, these schools would have been cheaper to build, certainly, during the opposition's time in government. They failed to provide results for Manitobans, which is why Manitobans are moving in a new direction. We also know that not just here in Manitoba, but across Canada, thankfully, inflation rates are starting to come down, and so costs will come down. So we know that our plan is achievable. We know that we are going to make sure that new schools are constructed every year. We're going to make sure that the needs of Manitobans are met, and we're going to do so in a way that is transparent to Manitobans, that gives Manitobans real hope and not false hope, and is done in a way that's achievable. Very proud of the capital plan that we've put forward. Very proud of the work of the department in their planning exercises that they've been doing over the past year under new leadership. They're doing great work. We understand the need is great. There is a mess to clean up after 7.5 years of austerity and negativity and divisiveness under the previous government. Manitobans can have hope. Manitobans can have hope that they have a listening government. Happy to meet with members opposite. I had a few requests today in question period to meet. I'm happy to do that. Happy to meet. Our government's doors are open to everyone. The opposition included, the department, stakeholders. But I can't tell you how often that I've heard from folks in community about their inability, to have the ear of the previous government. Very recently, I was at an event and was speaking with a card-carrying member of the Progressive Conservative Party, someone who's very influential and had a lot of advice to offer the previous government. And they let me know that in 7.5 years, they could not get a meeting with a minister of the previous government. So that's unfortunate. I'm happy to take a meeting with that community member. Happy to continue working with all members of this committee and with our community.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. And the minister references that it was cheaper to build schools prior to her tenure in office. That's why we built 14 of them across the province. The member for Seine River was heckling me when I brought this up in question period last week. She'd forgotten, I guess, how many we built because she was saying, where are they? Where are the schools you built? Well, they're in the constituencies of the member for Waverley and the member for Brandon East and the member for Morden Winkler and the member for La Vérendrye and the member for McPhillips, to name just a few. And so I almost offered for the member for Seine River if I could draw her a map to find these schools, if that would help them be a little bit more informed about the reality of the 7.5 years in building schools that we had seen. But I digress. Those are facts. Those schools were built. The minister can take a tour. She mentioned getting invited out to constituencies. I'm sure that the member for La Vérendrye, when he's taking her to the school in Grunthal, could also tour her by the new school we built in St. Malo while she's out on the road outside the Perimeter Highway. Her colleague, the member for Brandon East, I'm sure would be glad to take her by Maryland Park School that we built. But I digress. And so, Chairperson, the minister has put a lot of comments on the record about how proud she is of her government's record on inflation. And so if she is so proud of this record, will she go to, we know that she has no interest in proceeding with a P3 model to build schools. So if she's so proud of her government's record on inflation, will she go to Treasury Board and ask the province to borrow the money and fund the build of these 9 schools that are included in the Manitoba Schools project?
The Honorable Minister.
Yeah. So, thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Thank you to the member opposite. It's no surprise that members opposite so far have only been interested in talking about the physical structures that kids learn in. And that's important. It's important dialogue, and it's one that I'm happy to continue having, and I'm sure we will continue to have. And that's because their record on what happens inside the school is so dismal that they have to focus only on the structures. Again, which is important. We are here, our government is here to support school divisions. You know, school capital and the physical structures are important, but they are only one of several components that goes in to supporting the educational needs and outcomes that Manitobans are looking for. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that, because I think it's really important. It is important to talk about capital. It's important to talk about building new schools, but that is only one part of the equation. And again, I'm not surprised that the members opposite want to focus on that because of their record on what happens inside the schools, which is, again, why Manitobans elected a new government. This government was won on a few issues. This election was won, my apologies. This election was won on a few very important issues. Healthcare being far and away the #1 issue that Manitobans are thinking about and continue to think about. But also public safety and also the failures in the education system. So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the work that our government has done and is doing to make sure that the needs, the fulsome needs of kids and families and communities are being met. So one of those is a small class size initiative. We know that kids need more direct access to their educators, to their supports in schools, something the previous government did not care about at all. The previous government had no concern about class size. Let's get rid of rules about class size. Let's pack as many kids as we want into the classroom. That's not something, that's not a value that our government has. Our government is assessing what's going on in classrooms today and is going to make sure that small class sizes are a priority for schools going forward. Another thing we've done that will really be transformational for our province is the introduction of a school nutrition program. It is a legacy project that will serve Manitobans for years to come. We are already hearing from educators and school divisions about the impact that our school nutrition program is having on students today. It's bringing kids into the classroom, kids that traditionally maybe haven't always been there. It's attracting kids to the classroom. It is going to create systemic change over society for decades to come. I am so proud of our school nutrition program, and we know it's something the previous government didn't believe in. They said it. They said it was a bad idea. That's a direct quote. They said that there might be unintended consequences. What might be the unintended consequences of introducing a nutrition program? The unintended consequences are that kids aren't hungry, that they're coming to school, that they're getting an education. You'd think it would be a nonpartisan issue, but unfortunately, and again, I rarely try to understand the reasoning on the other side of the House, and it's a real head scratcher how anyone could think that a school nutrition program is a bad idea. It's such a good idea, in fact, that the federal government decided to introduce one as well. So I have more to say about the good work we're doing in our school system. I look forward to more questions.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Once again, Chairperson, the minister is unfortunately wrong. We were, of course, concerned about classroom sizes. That's why we were actually building new ones. 14 schools worth of new ones, in fact, during our time in office. But I digress. The minister commented on the nutrition program. These are questions that I asked the previous Minister of Education earlier in estimates back in the spring. But I'll just ask her, for the sake of the fact that she brought it up, if she believes that 52 cents a day per student in our public school system is enough to adequately feed students.
The Honourable Minister.
It's unfortunate, the characterization that the member opposite has made about our wildly successful, transformational, historic school nutrition program. If you wanted, he knows better. He knows that this program wasn't rolled out in the way that he's presenting. Our program was rolled out in a very intentional way that was needs-based. So not every school gets the same amount of money. Not every student gets 52 cents, and he knows that's the case. He knows that's not true. It's a political way for him to try to, again, still follow his party line and say that feeding kids is a bad idea. It's nonsensical. Manitobans don't understand it. I don't understand it. But that's how he chooses to characterize it. The department, again, assessed need across the province. And where the need was greatest, the most amount of dollars flowed. There are plenty of schools where the need is not great. And don't get me wrong, this program is available to every single school. But where there isn't as much need, not as many dollars flowed. Where there is greater need, more dollars flowed. Manitobans are smart. Manitobans understand that. Manitobans support our school nutrition program. I wish the members opposite would get on board and agree that feeding hungry kids is the right thing to do. I am incredibly proud of our school nutrition program, of the intentional, needs-based way in which it's being delivered. And we're gonna have to continue, this is our first year. We're gonna continue to assess that need. We're gonna make adjustments where they're necessary. But the need is not distributed equally across our province. We all know that. Need is not, apologies. If we're familiar with our own constituencies, we know that there's different need in our own constituencies. And we should all be able to agree that the need is different across the province and across schools. So where there is the highest need, students in those schools will get a breakfast, a lunch, and a snack program. In schools where there is not as much need, maybe there is only a snack program. But Manitobans and students can rest assured that this program is universally accessible. And that means even where perhaps the need is not as great, there will be a snack program available in that school in the unfortunate circumstance that a kid who maybe doesn't have the need, maybe forgot their lunch on the counter that day. So this is a universally accessible program. It is not delivered in the way the member opposite is presenting, at 50-some cents a student. That's crude, basic, averaging math. But he knows it's disingenuous, and he knows that's not how our program is rolled out. We've committed $30 million, which is a fantastic start. One we know, an investment, no better investment. There's no better investment than investing in our kids, investing in our education system. And that's what the school nutrition program does. And we have no doubt that this $30 million initial investment will pay dividends for years to come. It's going to make sure kids are in the classroom. It's going to make sure that they have access to the educational programming and opportunities that are available in our school system. And it's going to set them up for success in the future. So happy to discuss in greater detail our school nutrition program. And I wish that the members opposite could agree could state what they know to be true, which is that feeding hungry kids is the right thing to do. Thank you.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. And once again, the minister is wrong. This is becoming a bit of a theme today. She knows that I have no issue with feeding hungry kids. I never have, and that's never been the position of our party or our caucus. So those were disingenuous comments. The members opposite are laughing, but they can look at any document supporting the PC party platform. It has never been the position of this caucus that feeding hungry kids is wrong. I'd love for the minister to quote the individuals and table the documents she was quoting them from. Those individual comments do not reflect this PC caucus's position, so her characterizations are false, which shows, a lack of briefing perhaps on this file. I'm not sure. But what I am questioning about this platform and program that the NDP has rolled out is their abject failure for this minister and government to budget an appropriate level of funding to make this program successful. And I have heard from school divisions all summer long that they are very concerned that the funding allocated in budget 2024 was not sufficient to successfully deliver this program, and concerns about in the following budgetary year what funding is coming forward and whether this will be looped in with their overall operating grants that they receive from the Department of Education, or whether it will continue to receive separate funding from the department and the government. And so the question is not whether we agree with feeding hungry kids or not, it's whether this NDP government is appropriately funding the program which they have promised to Manitobans to be successfully delivered. Can the minister confirm whether or not this funding will continue to be included, or continue to be separated as a separate budgetary line, or whether it will be rolled into the overall operating grants delivered to school divisions, and whether or not she believes that this level of funding is enough to successfully deliver this program?
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. What I can say about our $30 million historic investment is that it's $30 million more than the previous government ever invested in feeding kids in schools. They claim to agree that this is a good program, but they consistently vote against our budgets. $30 million more than the previous government ever invested. I'm glad to hear them admit that it's a good idea. I'm so glad that we can finally agree that feeding kids is a bad idea, but the member opposite is patently.
Might be a Freudian slip.
Did I misspeak? The
Yes.
member opposite is telling me that I misspoke. Thank you, member from Spruce Woods. I appreciate your assistance and your collaborative spirit. I apologize to the committee if I misspoke. I'm not even sure what I.
We could agree it's a good idea.
We can agree it's a good idea. Did I say we agree it's a bad idea? I misspoke. I'm glad that we can finally agree here today at this committee that feeding hungry kids is a good idea. But the member opposite is incorrect when he says that that's always been his party's position. He knows that the former leader of his party said that it was a bad idea. And he knows that the interim leader of his party today, the member for Lac du Bonny, just a week or 2 weeks ago in the House, said that sandwiches, fruit, vegetables, milk, and more is not a real meal for kids. When the interim leader stood up to criticize our school nutrition program, it left everyone in the House scratching their heads. It was quite a wild moment, actually, and I think even members opposite would agree that they were scratching their heads about what in the world the interim leader of the PC caucus was talking about when he was criticizing our government providing sandwiches, vegetables, and milk to children. That it was not a real meal. I think he used the word dishonest, that it was a dishonest lunch. We're all still scratching our heads as to what that means. But I digress. I am glad that here today in this committee that we can all agree that funding nutrition programs in school is the right thing to do. And again, the member asked whether or not the amount was sufficient. And as I've said, the $30 million investment we made this year is $30 million more than the previous government ever made to feeding kids in school. The previous government, in fact, left it to the nonprofit sector. And thank goodness for the Child Nutrition Council of Canada, for the Breakfast Club of Canada, to Manitoba Harvest. All of these folks were doing this work of providing meal programs in schools prior to the election of our NDP government. The nonprofit sector was filling that gap, a gap left by the previous government, who never provided a nutrition program, now agrees that it is the right thing to do. They applaud the NDP government, I'm hearing, for introducing a nutrition program. I'm glad to hear that they are on board and they support it. I can't wait to see them support next year's budget, which will in fact include a separate budget line for the nutrition program. And that's to ensure that school divisions and schools continue to earmark and use that money for what it's intended, which is to feed hungry children in our schools. But it wasn't only the nonprofit sector that was doing this work, and I want to shout out and lift up educators in our system who I know were doing this work. And I know that because I am the daughter of 2 school teachers. Both my parents taught in the Winnipeg School Division for their whole careers. My mom still teaches, 50 plus years she's been teaching. And I can't tell you how many times that my parents came home hungry because they shared their lunch with a student that didn't have. That's regrettable. It shouldn't happen. That's why the NDP introduced a nutrition program. But I just want to acknowledge the sacrifices that teachers and educators have made in the absence of the school nutrition program in order to make sure that their students are fed.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks to the Minister. I think we're an hour and 20 minutes in today, and that might be the first black and white answer we've got. So here we go. Let's try for two. The Minister made a lot of comments in a couple of previous answers about the fact that we're not concerned about what's going on inside schools, which is, of course, ludicrous. And so to build on that vein, I would ask her to please update all Manitobans on the student information system and where the development of that project is at. To be clear, the current member for Transcona, is quoted in a CBC article as having said that he wants an information system so that he can log into it, or he being the Department of Education, the government, can log into it and know what student attendance rates are, etc., right from a very accessible digital portal to increase availability of that data. So can the Minister update this committee and all of Manitobans on the status of the development of that project?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, and thank you to the member about an important question about data and information. Our government absolutely wholeheartedly believes in making decisions and designing policy based on data. It's important to how we design our healthcare system, something the previous government abjectly failed at listening to the experts, failed at assessing the data, and that's why we're in some of the healthcare mess that we are today. When speaking about data in the education system, we understand that divisions are already doing some of this work, so we don't want to replicate or duplicate work that's being done, but we do want to streamline and make sure that there is something accessible for use to assist in our planning and our policy development. I can share with the committee that the scope of the information system has shifted from one that was costly and time-consuming and didn't make a lot of sense, quite frankly. And that was the plan of the previous PC government. And what we've shifted towards is a focus on outcome indicators and a system that leverages existing data and systems. It's going to enhance our ability to make data-driven decision-making with ultimately the aim of improving educational outcomes and creating a cohesive and effective approach to monitoring student achievement. Our initiative will leverage existing data and local student information systems to strengthen the process through which schools and school divisions assess, monitor, and report on student achievement to the province, to parents and caregivers, and to the public. Our government is committed to continuing to work with school divisions who will be involved in this planning through continued engagement and collaboration to ensure that the data collected and reported on is used purposefully with minimal disruption to the system. I think we all can agree that data is very important in our decision-making process and our policy development moving forward. And I'm glad to share with the committee that our project and our data dashboard is scheduled to be up and running for the next school year. Thank you.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, Chairperson. So just seeking some clarity from the minister then. So the decision has been made by this government to proceed rather than a universal system that all school divisions would feed information into. They're going to incorporate the school division systems that are pre-existing and then develop for the school divisions that don't have into some kind of universal dashboard that the Department of Education will monitor rather than creating a new system that's universal for all school divisions. Am I understanding that correctly?
The Honorable Minister.
So our government recognizes the need to streamline and be able to collect universal data, but there's other ways to do that other than rehauling and mandating a new system onto all school divisions, all of which are already doing this work. So what our project purports or plans to do is to get the existing systems that are already working, that school divisions are working with, to work together and to be able to coalesce that data into a system that is cohesive and is universal. What we need to implement is a common data standard to achieve the results that we're seeking. Rather than implementing a brand new, very costly, fiscally irresponsible new system, which was the plan of the previous government. There's better ways to do things. So putting to the plan that the previous government, the previous government's data information systems overhaul would have taken far too much time, would have been far too costly, and presented a whole host of other risks. So that's not what we're gonna do. We're not gonna mandate a common provincial student information systems. We're gonna make sure that the existing systems are designed in a way that they're producing a common data standard. Some other reasons why we're doing this is because 28 out of 37 school divisions are currently using or in the process of converting to a system called PowerSchool. And so we believe that for the remaining 9 divisions, with consideration for contract expiry dates, et cetera, there may be an opportunity for those other divisions to consider PowerSchool as their vendor, again, creating a common data standard. We also recognize that school divisions have made significant investments in acquiring, implementing, and customizing their current student information systems. And there's already been investments made to integrate other complex systems such as transportation, financial, and human resource information systems. So we want to support the work that the divisions have been doing already. We agree there's work to do in order to make sure that the divisions are producing a standard set of common data that can be integrated into one user-friendly system. But I think that we can do that with existing resources and with existing information systems in a way that makes sense, and in a way that doesn't waste a bunch of time, waste unnecessary dollars, and would waste the investments that school divisions have already made in data collection systems. Thank you.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you. The minister has outlined that there is going to be a provincial dashboard, I believe is the term she's using, that will translate data from all of the various school divisions in the ways that they're currently being collected. Is this dashboard being developed internally by department and government staff, or is the development of the dashboard, and I'm talking about the technical website development of it, the portal, if you will, so is that being developed by department and government staff, or has that work been contracted out?
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Thank you to the member opposite for the question. We're proud of our public service and our public servants, and I'm proud to share with the committee that this work is being done internally by department staff by using existing resources and existing IT platforms.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you. In respect to the minister's new role, is she aware that an RFP was posted and closed in early summer of last year, 2023, for bids to create a universal data system in the province of Manitoba, including a bid from a company that successfully operates a universal data system for schools in Saskatchewan, British Columbia, and Ontario? Is she aware of that?
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. To answer the question directly, yes, we're aware that that was issued by CGPS. But I also understand that there were issues with that tender. And my understanding is that that contract was not awarded. In the meantime, the government changed. And because that contract was not awarded, it gave our government the opportunity to re-examine the project and reassess what the needs were to accomplish the goal at hand, which is to create a accessible sort of universal information system to access data. And during that reassessment, we decided to move in another direction. As I said in my previous answer, we are proud of our public service. We are proud of our public servants, and we have no doubt that they're going to be able to deliver on this project. It was, I think, essential to reassess the plan of the previous government, considering other contracts that were awarded during their time in government. Manitobans know the issues and the cost to them from one project in particular named Project Nova that the previous government bungled and which continues to cost Manitobans. So in light of some of those failures, and in light of the historic deficit that our government was left with by the previous government in their irresponsible spending on their way out the door, leaving Manitobans on the hook for a nearly $2 billion deficit. We reassessed the scope of this project, and we're going to work on it internally. We're going to use the department staff, the incredible department staff that we have, and we're going to produce a result that will meet the goals of the program, and that will not cost Manitobans unnecessarily. Our government believes in accountability. We believe in serving the public interest, and we believe that there's a real need to assess all projects that were initiated under the previous government to make sure that Manitobans are seeing value for dollar, and to make sure that these projects are completed in a way that protects the public purse and that serves Manitobans' interest. Thank you.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, Chairperson. And, I'd like to thank the minister for confirming that they are not proceeding with the universal student information system. I've been contacted as the critic by some individuals who were who had bid on the project, of course, and haven't heard anything from this government since they took office. So I'll be relaying the clips of this exchange today to those individuals to inform them that this is the decision put forward by this government. I would have thought, perhaps not from the Department of Education, but the Government Services and Consumer Protection Department would have relayed the government's decision to them. But alas, they reached out to me looking for answers. And so now we have that on the record today. With respect to class sizes, the minister made some comments regarding her government's commitment to reduce class sizes. Meanwhile, they aren't building any new schools. So my question to the minister is, what is an acceptable class size to her?
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, and I thank the member opposite for the question, which I can only interpret as meaning that he supports another one of our great initiatives, which is promoting smaller class sizes. So I appreciate the question. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. Just like we agree that the Universal Nutrition Program is a great thing, I'm glad to hear that we agree that small class sizes and a great thing is a great thing, and I'm glad to talk about it a little bit more. So we know that improved student-to-teacher ratios in those early years help that Manitoba's youngest learners get the individualized support that they need to reach their full potential. We're not specifying targets right now. We're providing reasonable guidance and having a reasonable dialogue with divisions about what that looks like. And what that looks like, what the data shows us, what science tells us, is that for the K-3 grades, around 20 kids per classroom is what's reasonable, and above grade 3, around 25. It's not a mandate, it's a discussion, and it's some guidance. And schools know this, educators know this. They know that those are reasonable ratios, and they know that those ratios best serve students, which at the end of the day is what we're all here to support, is students and educators in our school system and producing the best outcomes that we can. So while there isn't a mandate today, we have introduced some accountability by asking school divisions to report average class sizes to make sure that there is adequate student-to-teacher ratios. And one of the ways that we can support divisions meeting those reasonable guidelines that we've been discussing with them is with operational funding. Not only have we committed and earmarked specifically $3 million in this school year for school divisions to address the challenges of large class sizes for K-3 learners. We've also increased the entire K-12 education funding by $104 million this year, which is an increase above the rate of inflation, which is something the previous government never did during their time. Operational funding was stagnant under the previous government, which only makes class sizes grow, which puts pressure on educators, and ultimately puts pressure on students. So that's why our government invested over $104 million this year for operational funding. All school divisions saw an increase in their funding. And that's because our government recognizes that stable, predictable funding for schools is the best way to have schools meet their enrollment and address student need. Another thing we've done is we've restored divisions' ability to generate additional revenues based on their own local priorities. We've given freedom back to the school divisions, is what we've done in our first year in government. And we're very proud of that work. So the $104 million that we've increased funding this year includes more than $51 million for operating support, $11.3 million increase in capital support, $30 million for our Universal Nutrition Program, and a almost $11 million increase in funding to independent schools. So again, I'm glad to hear that we agree that decreasing class sizes is a good thing. I'm glad that we have the support of the opposition on this.
Order. The minister's time has expired. The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you. No targets could be a theme across government departments for this new NDP government, but I won't get into that. The minister mentioned that they've required school divisions report in the size of classes across divisions. Will the minister table those reports?
The honorable minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. In our discussion and dialogue with school divisions about this goal that we all agree is a good goal, which is to reduce class sizes here in Manitoba, what we've asked the school divisions to do is to report, to make this reporting available on their websites. So the member opposite and all Manitobans will be free to access that data. But certainly, it's something I'm willing to consider compiling and tabling for the House if that's of interest. And again, I'm so glad to hear that we agree that this is a positive step forward, that reducing class sizes is a good idea, as is feeding kids in schools. Our department and our government has been doing great work in both those regards, and I'm glad for the member opposite's support. Thank you.
The member for Lakeside.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable Minister. In July of 2023, with funding provided under the Canada, Manitoba, and the Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare, Manitoba announced the allocation of $132 million across 36 public schools to create childcare spaces for children under 7. Almost 3,000 new childcare spaces were planned. So one of those planned projects was actually in my constituency. The Warren Elementary School is to receive 40 new spaces through the Woodlands Childcare Program. So can you tell me when those spaces are set to open?
The Honorable Minister.
I thank the member for Lakeside for the very important question and for his advocacy for his community. It's commendable. I'm excited to share with the committee that our government is committed to supporting the growth of early learning and childcare here in the province, so that parents can pursue education and participate in the workforce. That's something that has been sorely lacking in this province. As a parent myself, over the past 7.5 years under the previous government, I felt this pinch, and I heard stories about this on the doorstep all the time. I recollect meeting a mother who shared with me her decision to not go back to work after a parental leave because she simply could not find childcare for her kids. And she also shared with me that frankly, even if she could have found a childcare space, that she wouldn't have been able to afford it. So lots of work to do, but we're committed to doing that work. And in partnership with Canada, the member mentioned the Canada-Manitoba Childcare Agreement. So in partnership with Canada, I'm proud to share with the committee that we are 40% of the way to meeting our goal of 23,000 new childcare spaces for children under 7 in the province of Manitoba. Proud to share that over 3,200 of those spaces have already opened. We have committed to another 6,000 spaces, and certainly with thousands more on the way. In addition to those preschool aged spaces, we have also managed to open or committed to more than 4,400 school age spaces through strategic investments for a total of nearly 13,000 new childcare spaces throughout Manitoba. But similar to the dialogue about schools in this province and the need to not just build the physical structures or create the physical spaces, we also have to make sure that we have the workforce to support those spaces. And that's something that, again, has been sorely lagging under the leadership of the previous failed PC government. Our government in the first year have already increased wages to early childhood educators by 2.75%, which should assist in recruitment and retention. We have continued with the tuition reimbursement program. We've expanded post-secondary ECE programs, including the establishment of 2 new diploma programs. So there's a lot of work to do, not just in creating the spaces, but to make sure that we have retained and recruited the folks that need to work in those spaces. And before we run out of time, to answer the specific question, I'm pleased to share with the member that my understanding is that the Warren Elementary School project has been approved and will be proceeding.
The member for Spruce Woods.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Just want to confirm in the minister's response to my last question that she indeed will be taking the matter under advisement to compile the data requested and table it for all Manitobans.
Order. The hour being 5 p.m. Committee rise.